Welcome to the Book of Mormon Evidence podcast with host Rod Meldrum. This week's Come Follow Me supplemental study is Lesson 21, Mosiah chapter 29 through Alma 4. They were steadfast and immovable. This week, Rod's guest is Kay Fairchild. She has a BA in English and Creative Writing and is an author and educator. Kay was raised in Southern California and served an LDS mission. She is an author of 2 books, The Basic Principles Underlying the Bill of Rights and The Lord's Economic System versus the Economic System of Babylon. She has also written many articles. She also has presentations in the Book of Mormon Evidence streaming site, Silk and Linen of the Nephites and Jaredites, as well as Grains and Grapes of the Nephites and Jaredites.
Welcome to another edition of the Book of Mormon Evidence podcast, where you're talking about the Come Follow Me. These are supplemental materials. Again, we just want to reiterate that this is not to replace this. This is in addition to this. So hopefully you've all gone through your lessons manuals here. And today I have a very special friend of mine. She's a expert on a couple of things in the Book of Mormon that have been people have wondered about as far as some of the plants of the Book of Mormon, and also specifically some of the what they were wearing. So some of the clothing of the Book of Mormon. So I have with me here today. This is Kay Fairchild, and thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome, Rob.
Okay, I'm
happy to be here.
It's fantastic to have you here. So in the Book of Mormon, they talk about several different kinds of. We've already talked about plants and animals and those kinds of things, but they talk about specifically some of the things that they were wearing.
Yes, silks and linens.
Oh, yes. Okay, exactly. So let's start off here if we can. We're using the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon here. If you don't already have one, you can pick those up at the Deseret Book or Costco or on our website, which is another great place to get them. And we're going to start off actually by going to the earliest account in the Book of Mormon of the Jaredites, and what kind of things did they have? So let's turn here. We're going to turn to this is Ether, and we're going to go to chapter 9, and then we're going to start with verse 16, which is on page 470 of the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon, or 471 is where most of it will actually fall. I'll read just a little bit of this, and you kind of break in there, and we're going to talk about just some specific things. So in verse 16 of Ether chapter 9, it says, "And the Lord began again to take the curse from off the land. And the house of Emer did prosper exceedingly under the reign of Emer. And in the space of 62 years they had become exceedingly strong, insomuch that they began to become exceedingly rich, having all manner of," and these are some of the things, they had fruit and grain, silks and fine linen. I know we're going to talk about that in just a minute. "And of gold and of silver and of precious things, and also all manner of cattle and oxen and cows and sheep and swine and goats and all manner of other kinds of animals which were useful for the food of man. And they also had horses and asses, and there were elephants and curlams and cumams, all of which were useful unto man, but more especially the elephants and the curlams and cumams." Now, a couple of quick things before we go too far into this. I wanted we've already talked about animals and things like that. Elephants are, of course, indigenous to North America. Almost every natural history museum in the Midwestern part of the United States have elephants or elephant-like creatures like mammoths or mastodons. In fact, at the Ohio State, the main museum there in Columbus, Ohio, is the Ohio History Connection. They have a fully articulated mammoth there in the museum, and so we know that the elephants were definitely here in North America, and so that's an interesting part of it.
Did you know that Orson Pratt in one of his talks said that a curlum was a mammoth? There are mammoth bones all over North America.
Yep. I did not know that he said that. Mm-hmm. Who was that?
Orson Pratt.
Orson Pratt talked about that. Yeah, because when it comes down to curlams and cumams, I've basically just said we don't really know what those things are, but that's an interesting aspect of it there. But we do know what elephant-like creatures are, and they are all over the place. Okay, so what about elephants in the Book of Mormon? So just very briefly, obviously this is an image of the Bray tar pits, and there's elephants that are full of that, and there's all kinds of elephants there. This is an elephant that is at the Columbus, Ohio. This is called the Ohio Historical Connection Museum. This is a fully articulated elephant there. There's elephant bones and basically elephant-like creature bones. There's mammoths and mastodons and so forth. There's some of the teeth up there in the upper part of that. And then also we know that they were there at the same time as native peoples, basically, or humans, because we have, for example, the Kimswick site, and that's called the Mammoth State Park in Missouri. They actually found a Native American arrowhead embedded in the bones of a mastodon. And so we know that they were hunting the mastodons. We know that this elephant-like creature died from this. Interestingly enough, though, the Nephites never mentioned elephants or Kurlams or Cumams. It was only the Jaredites.
Which makes you think that they were extinct, probably extinct by the time the Nephites arrived.
So who made them extinct? Probably the Jaredites. Okay. So then this is going back to the La Brea tar pits, and this is showing a couple of different a juvenile and then a full adult that they'd found in the La Brea tar pits. This is another interesting one. That if you can see this, that this is actually horse bones, ancient horses that were also found in the La Brea tar pits. And of course, the Book of Mormon here in Ether here, it actually talks about having horses and asses and so forth. This is the extinct western horse. Now, they think that these animals went extinct. However, the Native Americans say that these animals never did go fully extinct. They died off. A lot of them did die off, but they were still there in their time frames. And there's more we can talk about horses and so forth in the Book of Mormon. But here we have actual evidence for ancient horses in North America. This is a pipe that is found. This particular pipe is located in the Ohio Historical Connection Museum in Columbus, Ohio. And if you take a look at that, it looks a little bit like
a horse head.
A horse head. And these pipes were indicative specifically of the Hopewell Mound Building people, who are the people that we are saying were the Nephites of the Book of Mormon, or they're in the same time frame, and every aspect about their culture and civilization matches with the Book of Mormon. But here's a horse, okay, and there's you can kind of see how this sort of looks similar. This is another drawing of a horse. There's the drawing over that. It has a big dent in its forehead where there's a little bowl for the pipe where they would put the material that they were going to be smoking in the pipe, and so that's why there's kind of a dent there. But it's interesting enough. I mean, is that a possibility of being a horse head?
Looks like it could be.
It could possibly be, but also they talked about oxen and cows, and actually when Coronado first came to when he was doing his route and so forth, when he came over in the southeastern part of the United States, they went quite a ways to the west, and he talked about immense herds of cows going about in their leisure. And so this is one interesting thing they talked about. He talked about these buffalo as being cows or cow-like creatures, and of course we have the ancient evidence of ancient buffalo, or basically cows, or in some cases they might be mistaken for oxen. And that's a little bit about this. But what we want to focus on here, though, with K, is in verse 17, silks and fine linen.
Yeah, and
you've done a lot of research. Tell us a little bit about how you started with this and some of your research here.
So when I read in the Book of Mormon that the Jaredites and Nephites had all manner of fruits, I was kind of curious as to what some of those fruits were, and so I started researching native fruits that are found in the Americas, and I started looking at North, Central, and South America. And when I did that, I came across lots of other foods that were here. For example, did you know that there are over 80 species of onions in the Americas? 80. Multiple types of native. I found grapes, plums, cherries, mulberries, figs, all kinds of nuts, wild barley and rye, and even a type of hyssop that is different here in America than in the old world. But then I came across this little entry for blue flax, which is a native plant of Utah, and the Spirit whispered to me, now you're on to something. And I thought, why is this so important? I already knew that linen was made from flax, but what I didn't know...
Flax is a...
Flax is a plant.
Okay.
It's a plant.
Okay.
So linen is a fabric made from this plant.
From the plant fibers from
flax.
From flax plants.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I didn't know was that flax grew wild all over North America. That's what really surprised me. For example, I'll give you some numbers for flax here. In South America, there are 2 species of flax or linum.
Okay.
In Central America, there's one, and it's only in northern Mexico. But in North America, there are 29 species of linum or flax.
Wow.
That were growing wild here.
All kinds of flax here in North America. Yes.
White flowered, blue flowered, yellow flowered, all kinds.
They have different colors of the blossoms of this
Yes.
plant. Okay.
Yes.
Is that how they differentiate between the different varieties?
Well, no, they all have different scientific names, and they all grow in different areas. But flax basically grows from Canada to Arizona, and from the West Coast to the East Coast.
So basically, all of America has...
All of North America, and it goes as far south as northern Mexico, but it really is not found in Central America because it is a temperate climate cloth or plant. It's not a tropical plant. It's a temperate climate plant. And so when I came across that, the fact that there was so much flax here in North America, I realized, well, no wonder the Jaredites and Nephites were able to make all this linen that they talk about in the Book of Mormon, because it's here. It's growing wild here still.
Wow. Yeah, and in fact, that brings us to an important part of this thing. What was the purpose of the silks and the fine twined linen? I mean, do we have any idea of what they were actually wearing in the Book of Mormon? And wanted to give you a quick description. This is kind of an interesting thing. This is actually from American Antiquity. It's a journal. In 2004, what did the ancient Hopewell mound builders wear? What were they wearing as they lived here in North America, in the heartland of America? And this is a description from this article. This is volume 69, page number 1. This is in 2004. Provides a description based on artifacts found in Feature 12, Mound 7, Mound City, which is just outside of Chillicothe, Ohio. And they recovered, these are some of the things that they recovered. They recovered 2 what they call bat bangles. These are copper little effigies, essentially, little copper plates that have been pounded into a plate and then carved or cut into a shape or a form. They call it a bat bangle because it has kind of like, it looks like a head and a body, but it has like bat wings that come out, and then the wings have been cut out. Anyway, they think that was probably on some kind of a coat or a cloak of the person that was buried with it. They also talked about having copper breastplates and head plates in human form. There were other copper objects such as turtles, which is an interesting aspect because turtles is kind of fun. Turtles is, in the Book of Mormon, they said, we are on an isle of the sea. And Native Americans refer to America as
Turtle Island.
And one of the reasons for that, we believe, is because when Lehi first landed, we have Native Americans who have told us this, that when their people first landed, when Father Lehi first landed, that they found turtles. They came into an area on the beach where there were turtles, and they think somewhere around like Clearwater Beach, Florida, possibly.
And you know, the Jaredites, when they came to America, they came in boats that were tight like a dish. And I can only imagine that it may have looked like a turtle, because if you look at the Algonquin legends, it shows eight boats. And they called them... that looked just like turtles.
They call them turtle boats.
Turtle boats.
Yeah, tight like into a dish, just like exactly that's described there. So there were copper turtles and ear spools. Importantly, a copper goat horn, which is again about showing the animals that they had there. These are exactly the animals that are being talked about here in Ether on page 471 in the annotated Book of Mormon. It says a pair of ear spools was made of silver. In this, they talked about having gold and silver and precious things. So they had gold and silver. So here's evidence for having silver. And they were not only had silver, but they were making things from the silver. There were freshwater cultured pearl necklaces, bear canine teeth, shark teeth, as well as obsidian spear blades, panpipes. These are a pipe that are made out of copper that they actually could blow. Had like 4 different little chambers, so they could get 4 or multiple pitches on it. And amazingly enough, fabric samples were preserved against the copper breastplates. So the fabric samples are really fascinating. Catherine Jakes, she is one of the foremost experts on ancient textiles and so forth. And we're going to just share this with you, and then we're going to have you tell some more about where these things came from. But Catherine Jakes of Ohio State University in Columbus has conducted research for over 2 decades on the textiles of early Native Americans in Central and Eastern North America, specifically the Hopewell Mound Builder culture and the Mississippian culture, which came later. Jakes analyzed fragments of carbonized fabrics found in earth mounds, which were, quote, which has, quote, revealed decorative patterns indicating that at least some of the now faded Hopewell era textiles had been colorized. They had actually been colored. She goes on, she says, the presence of color reflects a significant level of technology, including knowledge of colorants in nature and of methods required to affix them to organic materials, unquote. So it wasn't just taking like yarns, for example, and then dipping them in some kind of a dye and then making things from the colored yarn. This actually, they made the textile first, and then they colorized the textile in place, which is a totally different and much more difficult way of colorizing clothing. And remember the sons of Mosiah, and they had the highly colorized garments. That's one of the things that they were doing, is they were trying to puff up themselves in their pride by wearing these costly apparel, which were more decorative and so forth than what the average Nephite was wearing apparently at the time. That's interesting. Yeah, but anyway, so this is a little bit about that. Just so you can see this. This is actually from a book. This is called Woven Fabric from the Sight Mound. The Sight Mound is in central Ohio. This is actually fabric that was recovered from that because of its proximity to a copper breastplate. So not only do they have copper breastplates, which the Book of Mormon specifically talks about, but because of the copper breastplate having this fabric over the top of it, the copper actually preserved the fabric. And so that's why we have that fabric. Here's some other examples of the weaving. We actually have enough samples that we can actually tell what the weaving looked like.
And let's go to Mosiah 10:5 right now, since you're talking about the weaving.
Yes, let's go to, now this is now back to the Nephites here, Mosiah chapter 10 and verse 5, I think you said. Yeah, so this is on page 161 in the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon. And let's go ahead and would you like to read that?
Sure. I did cause that the men should till the ground and raise all manner of grain and all manner of fruit of every kind. And I did cause that the women should spin and toil and work all manner of fine linen, yea, and cloth of every kind, that we might clothe our nakedness. And thus we did prosper in the land. Yeah. So in other words, they were using linen for their clothing.
Yes, it's so funny because when I've gone back to these museums back east with our tour groups and so forth, generally speaking, most of the time when they depict these ancient people, they depict them in these leathers. They were wearing kind of these raggedy leathers and so forth that they didn't have the sophistication of having textiles.
Well, the Lamanites, that might have been true for some of them.
True. Yeah, exactly. And we know, in fact, that sometimes they actually wore lamb skins, which of course is leather.
Yes.
And so forth. The Gadiant robbers did that.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the Lamanites all wore leather because they weren't agricultural, they were hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And the animal that they hunted the most, we feel like, was probably the buffalo.
Right.
But also there's deer, there's moose, there's elk, there are goats, there's all kinds of animals that their skins could be used as clothing. But here we see that they are not using, the Nephites at least, are not using animal skins, they're using textiles.
And if Joseph Smith was a liar, Why didn't he just say, and he knew about the modern Indians, why didn't he just say that they were wearing loincloths or that they were wearing animal skins? Mm-hmm. Why did he have the nerve to say that they were wearing silk and linen? That's a very bold thing to say.
Yeah, and who knew back in Joseph Smith's day that the people who preceded the Native Americans that were there in Joseph Smith's day might have actually been wearing clothing made out of textiles instead of just wearing leathers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a great point. By the way, at the top of page 161, it talks about cloth of every kind, and I just want to read this a little quickly for you who are listening. It says, the comparatively well-made fabrics of the Hopewell Mounds of the Etowah group of Georgia indicate that some convenient adaptation of the loom was in use in these areas. So they actually had looms, mm-hmm. which is what you need to be able to weave cloth, and that's from Henry Clyde Chetrone, the Mound Builders, and this was back in this was in 1983. This is 1930s when this book came out. So they knew this clear back in the 1930s. Figures on the right show various weaving of cloth by the Hopewell group found in Georgia. Descriptions of each weave are in the descriptions here. Then below left is woven cloth found in the Sipe Mound, Chillicothe, Ohio. And that was from 1928. Cloths of various weaves were preserved by contact with the copper. And so you can actually see this is where Sipe Mound was located. Now, also, if we go back to our screen here for just a second, this is one of the ways that they know that there were colorants that were used, and they weren't just dyeing a specific group, bunch of yarn, and then basically making that into a fabric. Because this is a woven fabric in colored designs. This is actually the breastplate that was found, or they found numerous breastplates in the Sipe Mound in central Ohio. But there are 3 skeletons in the central Sipe Mound in Ross County, Ohio. They were found preserved by the chemical action of large copper breastplates corresponding portions of burial robes bearing designs in color. So burial robes, that's an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. And designs in color. The photograph above was taken in situ. In other words, this was taken as they were excavating the site. The background of the fabric is maroon in color with tan designs outlined in black. Designs are not woven into the cloth but are affected by staining or dyeing with mineral colors, possibly the use of stamps or dyes. And so you can see if you take a look at the artwork of the Hopewell Mound Builder people, they have, generally speaking, quite flowing, soft designs. They're not very angular and hard like you typically find in the Mayan culture, for example. You take a look at their priests and their artwork. It's very jaggedy and very stark. This is very soft and flowing material, and you can see kind of a big circular thing, almost like a donut there, and then other designs. But unfortunately, the rest of that cloth was destroyed by being against the soil there, but the copper preserved this particular part of it.
Rod, it's even amazing that any cloth at all that was in the ground survived, because if you look at the decay rate of most cloths, that's like linen and cotton and wool, mm-hmm. they decay in a matter of weeks to months, most of them.
Yeah, because animals, the small microscopic animals, love that stuff.
Yeah, so for something like that to survive over hundreds and hundreds of years is amazing.
It really is amazing. In fact, so here's another. This is a breastplate, a copper breastplate with textiles still on it. Here's some other images of textiles here. This is actually from the Ohio Historical Connection in Columbus, Ohio. This is one of their displays here of a textile fragment from the Hopewell culture from Sipe Mound in Ross County, Ohio. So this is showing, again, more of their textiles. Here's more textile fabrics this is from the Hopewell Mound Group in Ross County, Ohio. So this is more textiles. And so you can see they had not just one or two, but they had numerous different types of textiles, just like the Book of Mormon describes. And again, these are not leathers. Now, one of the ways that we know about what kind of textiles they had is because they would take pottery. See, textiles, like you say, they're destroyed quickly. But if they use the textiles to imprint pottery, the pottery lasts a lot longer. So you can actually see what that looks like. This is a replica of the weave that has been impressed in the shard below. This is courtesy of Dr. Hazel Delcourt. And so you can actually see this is what that looks like. So what did the Nephites wear? Animal skins. The Book of Mormon provides insight into what kinds they wore. They had cloth of every kind. That's from Helaman chapter 8, verse 13. Let's just quickly go find that. So that's Helaman.
And, Rod, besides, they mention only two of the cloths specifically by name, the linen and the silk, and everything else is cloth of every kind. But we know that they had sheep and flocks, so they probably were working with wool.
Wool, yeah, that's right, absolutely. So if they had wool, then that would make sense as well. That this is another type of cloth that they might have had.
Yeah, but evidently, for some reason, and this is one of the things I discuss in my paper, which I wrote last year, is that evidently wool was not as important to them, to their religion, as the linen and silk. And I discuss why in this paper. So,
can you tell us just really briefly what that is?
Do you know why linen was so important? Because we have to go to the Old Testament to know why linen was so important. The Nephites, of course, were a people from the tribe of Joseph. And they came over from Jerusalem. So they basically were a Hebrew or Israelite people. So they brought with them their Israelite customs and beliefs.
Right.
And if you go to the Old Testament, you find it talks about the temple, the linen that was used in the temple by the priests. For example, Exodus 26.
Specifically, it says linen.
Fine twined linen was used to make the curtains of the tabernacle. The veil was made of linen. A hanging for the temple door was made of linen, and linen hangings were used in the court of the temple. The priest also wore linen. He had a girdle of the ephod made of fine twined linen, an embroidered coat of fine linen, and the mitre, that was the headdress that he wore, of fine linen. So linen was very important to the Hebrew people, to the Israelite people. It had to do with their religion because linen represents purity and righteousness. Especially if you go to scriptures in the book of Revelation, we jump from the Old Testament now to the book of Revelation, you'll find the scriptures that say that the linen is the righteousness of the saints. And so here we know that the Nephites, interestingly enough, were raising and wearing linen just like they were wearing it back in Jerusalem. It was part of their religion.
They would probably recognize the plants over there. And then when they came over here, they recognized, hey, we have the same plants over here. we can do the linens. We can do this ourselves.
In Israel, they have 5 species of linen. In the Americas, there are 31 species of linen, or flax, I should say, flax.
This is the flax.
Yeah, linum, Linum, is the scientific name for flax.
For the plant.
Yeah.
So let's go really quickly. This is from Helaman chapter 6, verse 13. And we don't have time to go to all of the scriptures because there are so many scriptures that talk about this. But this is another beautiful example. Behold, their women did toil and spin and did make all manner of cloth of fine twined linen and cloth of every kind to clothe their nakedness. And again, this is on page 356, Helaman chapter 6, verse 13.
Rod, the really interesting thing is when I wrote this paper and I found out that there was flax to make linen in North America, I had to know what cloth they had in North, Central, and South America. Yeah, so when I studied that, I found out that there are species of cotton that are native to America. And for example, there are 7 species of cotton in the Americas. 1 in Hawaii, 2 in Mexico and Central America, and 4 in South America. And there's about 4 species in the Old World. So there's actually more species of cotton in the Americas than there is in the Old World. But so in Central America and South America, in the warmer climate zones, they were weaving cotton for their clothes, whereas up in the Andes Mountains, they were using their alpacas, for the wool to stay warmer in those areas. But in Mexico and Central America, and the Caribbean, they wore cotton. And another thing that they also wore is they used
is cotton mentioned in the Book of Mormon?
Cotton is not mentioned in the Book of Mormon, and you would think
isn't it?
that if it was their number one material,
Textile,
like it is in Central and South America, in places of South America, that it would have been mentioned in the Book of Mormon, but it's not mentioned.
But there's no mention of cotton anywhere in the entire Book of Mormon.
And it's possible that the Nephites could have had access to cotton through trade. Now, cotton is a tropical or subtropical plant. So you're going to find it being used in those areas, whereas, North America is more of a temperate climate, like I said.
The reason why cotton growing in the United States, at least, is all in the southern states, pretty much.
Right,
You don't find cotton growing up in New York.
So why didn't Joseph Smith make a huge mistake? Because cotton calico was a very popular cloth at the time of Joseph Smith. Why did he make a huge mistake if he had really written the Book of Mormon himself and not translated?
Based on his own knowledge and
said, the Nephites were working with cotton. Well, I think it's because he translated the Book of Mormon. He didn't write it. He didn't make it up. He said, if I had to write that these people were wearing linen and silk, I would have been like, but I thought they only used silk in China and India. Silk somewhere else besides China and India? Are you kidding? And yet he made these outrageous claims.
Yes.
And would you like to go into silk a little bit?
Yeah. Let's finish up a couple things here.
Okay.
We're definitely, because I'm excited about this, because I know you've got some great stuff to share here. So, so that's a little bit about that. Mosiah chapter 10, verse 5. Now, we already talked a little bit about that, but let's go back to Mosiah chapter 10.
What page is that on?
And verse 5. And that is on page 161.
Okay.
And we did actually already talk about this, but I want to see if you can just address for us just a couple of things. This one talks about fine linen. Sometimes you've said fine linen. Sometimes you said fine twined linen. What's the difference?
I had to look that up because there are different weaves of linen, and some, you can have a coarse type of a textile or you can have a fine type of a textile. But it's interesting that they say fine twined linen. And I think that the reason that they put that in the Book of Mormon more than once, besides the fact that they were making fine twined linen or a very fine weave, is that it has to do with righteousness again. Fine having to do with the purity.
Yeah, because you mentioned about the priests, for example, some parts of their outfit would be linen. Some of them were fine twined linen.
Right.
Which I would guess the twining process basically is the twisting process, right? And so the twining of it basically may have something to do with how coarse it is. And some if it doesn't have the twining, it might be actually even more flat, basically less texture-y. I don't know, maybe that's the way to put it.
So you're going to have to get a textile expert to answer this one, not me, because I'm not a textile expert.
Okay, but I will say this though. Catherine Jakes, who is a textile expert, she actually has come out and said that some of the weaves, some of the cloth that was made by these ancient Hopewell and Mississippian culture people in the heartland of America were so fine that they were actually sheer.
That's amazing, isn't it?
In other words, see-through, which almost you would expect that to be silks. So this is under scraps of evidence. Chemical analysis and powerful microscopy can reveal remarkable characteristics of textiles, what plants and animals the fibers came from, how the yarns were made, what weaving techniques were employed, and what dyes or pigments were used to color them. Such information, combined with other evidence, enables researchers to infer the technological skills of early people and the cultural importance of their textiles, notes Catherine Jakes of Ohio State University in Columbus. Quote, people had a particular intent when they were producing these textiles, unquote, she says. Jakes, who is trained in polymer chemistry, has used advanced methods of chemical analysis in her 2 decades of research on textiles of early Native Americans in Central and Eastern North America. These groups, known collectively as the Hopewell and Mississippi cultures or civilizations, inhabited the region extending from Florida to New York and westward to Wisconsin. They lasted from about 100 BC until encroachment by European explorers and settlers in the early 1500s. Individual groups had distinctive ways of life, but they shared many beliefs and practices, including elaborate cremation ceremonies in which textiles played an important role. This is in their death.
So they would have cremated
things.
the what they were wearing with the body.
That's right. Among the fabric samples Jakes has analyzed are carbonized scraps from Hopewell burial sites, which were typically earth mounds. Charring during the cremation inhibited the growth of bacteria among the threads and prevented local or total disintegrations to find out what combinations of plants and minerals the Hopewell groups may have used to produce various colors. These are for the colors. Prehistoric people probably used sumac and bedstraw as dyes, Jake says, because caches of those seeds have been recovered from archaeological sites, although the plants have no known dietary use. So they were actually storing the dyes to make for their material. In one set of experiments, for example, the researchers made dye baths from sumac berries and bedstraw roots combined with different mineral fixatives. When the researchers tested the baths on fibers from milkweed plants and rabbit hair, only one combination, sumac, bedstraw, and potassium carbonate, produced a deep red that was color fast. To estimate the time, let me see here. To estimate the time and skill that early Native Americans may have needed to make textiles, Jakes and her colleagues have done studies replicating yarn production from different plant fibers. In one experiment, several spinners were asked to produce yarns comparable in quality to those of textile artifacts from the Mississippian period in Carter County, Georgia. The results demonstrated that a spindle technique was more than twice as efficient as hand spinning methods. The spinning of cotton fibers went much slower than that of flax or hemp because cotton fibers are short and require more twists per turn to hold together the fibers. These findings and others indicate that early natives in what is now the eastern United States were highly skilled at cloth making, says Jakes, who presented some of her findings in Philadelphia at a meeting of the American Chemical Society. So there we go. These are non-Mormon experts talking about the ancient peoples of the heartland part of North America. The ancient Hopewell mound builder people did in fact use textiles. She actually even mentioned flax in this particular case, and then having these fine twined linens. It's just fabulous stuff.
It is. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
All this proof is coming out for the Book of Mormon.
Absolutely.
And how could Joseph Smith ever have known that? Unless he was translating the Book of Mormon, that they were making fine, very fine twined linen.
Yes. And not only that, but then also, if he was making this up, then when he talked about the sons of Mosiah, which we talked about how they had the bright colored clothing and so forth, and then we have the evidence that they were actually doing this bright clothing. I'm going to go back to this for a second. This is actually from the Hopewell Culture National Historical Park in Chillicothe, Ohio. This is just one of their displays here talking about the ancient textiles of the Hopewell. This is what they, based on that breastplate, this is what they think maybe a small portion of that fabric would have been that was on that person's body when they died and had the breastplate on them. Okay. They talk about dyes. They had different kinds of dyes and so forth here. Overall, this is some of this is a mannequin that was actually put up as probably the most accurate mannequin as far as I've seen as far as that's concerned. A lot of times they have people dressed in their leathers. Well, this guy is wearing almost like a tunic of some sort. It's kind of I don't know if you wouldn't call it a robe probably.
It's a woven textile.
But it's definitely a woven textile. It has these big broad patterns on it. By the way, at the bottom of his, down by his thighs area there, it shows two, it looks like bird heads, like a water bird. And that actually comes from some pottery that has been found from the mound, basically known as Zelf's Mound. There was a bowl there with these two bird heads and so forth on it. There's others have been found like that too. That wasn't found specifically, but that's just some of their art patterns, so they wanted to use that. Then you can see a breastplate, but they have it hanging really low for some reason. And then just other things. They had a breastplate. I had ear spools and so forth there.
And the pearls. Which
Which
also is talked about in the Book of Mormon, how they had pearls.
They had all manner of fine pearls. Okay, I just want to take just a second to just talk about this little woven bag. I call it the Gucci bag. Okay. This is actually in Tennessee now. So we've covered a lot of different places here from Ohio and so forth, then down to Tennessee. But this is a woven bag. It's on display at the McClung Museum at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And this is if you take a look at this, it says archaeologists seldom find textiles because most were made from plant material, which quickly decays, exactly like you said. More often, they see weaving impressions in pottery or clay, but in 1982, they found a rare treasure, this bag, in a cave in Van Buren County, and that's Tennessee. Radiocarbon dating determined that the bag was made, and get this, 2,190 years ago.
So about 190 BC.
It's right in the Book of Mormon time frames.
Yes.
But not only right in the Book of Mormon time frames, it happens to be right exactly in the time frames of the Nephites being in the Tennessee Valley area, the Tennessee area.
Isn't that amazing?
And this was found in a cave there. The weaver used several kinds of vegetable fibers, all probably local, to make the bag and to repair it at least 5 times. The photo shows one of those repairs. And for those of you who can't see this, basically you can see the bag is probably about 6 or 7 inches, about like this, 6 or 7 inches by about 5 or 6 inches or so. It's beautifully made. You can see little rows and so forth. And then this is a close-up picture of the upper part of it. You can see where they actually twined it. This is where they actually twisted the fibers into a twine, and then this has made this into basically fine twining. So this is actually showing the actual twining that was being done by who we believe the Nephites in the Book of Mormon, that carbon dates into the right time frame in the right place, exactly as the Book of Mormon describes. And there's no way that Joseph Smith could have possibly have known all of this as he was translating that book.
Think about the months and years that multiple people have spent researching all this information. And Joseph Smith had a 3rd grade education, never had a chance to go to college, never had a chance to do any research, and yet he made all these outrageous claims in the Book of Mormon that are now being substantiated by science.
Yeah, they were too poor to own books, and they lived too far out in the country to have really a lot of books available to him. We know that they would go and check out books occasionally, and he was a voracious reader. We know that. But the bottom line is that there weren't even books written about these kind of things.
No, a lot of the information is coming out now in modern times.
10, 15 years.
Yes.
So this last photo of what I call my Gucci bag here is basically just shows you how beautiful this is and how well made that this gives you an idea of this whole thing.
And I want to say that when the Spanish first came to Central America, they saw some of the natives, like I said, cotton was the main cloth, but they saw some of the natives wearing a linen-like material. But it turns out that they work with agave fibers. There's a number of different species of agave that they make materials from.
Agave is kind of like aloe vera plant. It's like huge, like on steroids.
Right.
It's a huge plant.
And they actually make, the Central Americans and Mexicans make cloths from the Sicil agave, the agave americana, and the maguey agave. And henequen is the name of the cloth that they make from the Phorcroides agave. But henequen is, although it's made from a plant fiber, it is not linen. Linen is always made from flax. So they did not really work with, there's no evidence so far, at least, from what we know, that they ever worked with linen in Central America.
So the Mayans had no linen.
They had no, I don't know that much about the Mayans.
Right. But they're the people in Central America.
But they would have been working with agave fabrics
instead of flax
and cotton.
Okay, now we got to get to the real exciting things about. Let's talk about silk.
Silk. Yeah.
Because silk, I mean, the Chinese. I mean, isn't China the only place you get silk?
You know what?
What's the deal
Before
with that?
I did this research, that's what I thought. I thought, silk historically has been centered in China, right? With the silkworm
Silk
there,
trade,
and that's where they have the mulberry bush that the silkworms eat. But after I did the research, I found out actually that there are multiple different kinds of silk-moths or silkworms that are used in Asia. In China, they mainly use something called the bombax, Chinese. In Thailand, for example, they use the Chinese bombax and the I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Saturnidae moss is scientific name. Saturnidae, wild Saturnidae moss. So depending on where you go, also in India, they use an Antheraea Asamensis, which is also in the Saturnidae family. The Samia Cynthia racini, also in the Saturnidae family. And they use the Bombax texter, which is in the Bombicidae family. So the thing is, I found out from doing this research that there's not just one kind of silkworm. There's multiple different kinds of silk moths that spin silk that they use in different areas of the world. So after I found that out, then I wanted to know, are there any silk moths and silkworms in America?
Well, that's what I want to know, because this is the Book of Mormon we're talking about here.
Yeah,
so
and it says that they were using silk. Well, guess what? There are silk moths in America. There are a number of different silk moths, and they're in the same family, the Saturnidae family and the Antheraea family. And these are silk moths. They're just wild ones here. So we don't really know now which kind of these silk moths they were using, the Jaredites and the Nephites were using. Mm-hmm. What we do know is that these silk moths are still here. So that there's a lot of different insects that they could have used to make their silks.
Wow.
And also, what I found out was
so they can make silks, but right now, do we have any archaeological evidence that they had actually silks?
I'll let you talk about that, because I think you have some evidence about some of the silk cocoons that they've found here, right?
Yeah. There's a museum in Missouri, and I don't remember exactly the name of it right now. It's in our other material, but there was a guy that had a huge collection of these Hopewell mound builder axe heads and arrow heads and arrow points and that kind of stuff. And he had all these different things. When he came and donated his collection to the museum, they had a little like a tobacco box, basically, that had when they opened it up, it had all these little cocoons in them, but they're silk. Mm-hmm. And he actually had it labeled as silk cocoons that were from these people. Now I don't know if They
were they from the Hopewell mounds?
Well, that's what they don't know for sure. I mean, was it something that was from really anciently? Because he had all these other artifacts, but he didn't tell them whether or not this was a more recent thing or if it was later. But it was pretty interesting because it came in the same collection of Hopewell materials.
Now I have to add that the silk moths of the Americas are found in North, Central, and South America. So they could have made silk anywhere in these areas where they had the technology to do it. And also, even though they use the mulberry bush, they use the white mulberry in China. In America, we have the red mulberry, which is native to North America, especially eastern North America. And then there's also the Texas or Mexican mulberry. But silkworms in silk moths in America, or silkworms, because that's the stage that they're eating the plants at, is they're not limited to eating the leaves of the mulberry. They eat the leaves of various trees, including birch, willow, oak, maple, hickory, beech, walnut, honey locust, plum, cherry, sassafras, and American elm. So,
which are basically, you just named about almost every kind of tree in the eastern part of the United States.
Yes. So, in other words, the Jaredites and the Nephites might have been feeding their silkworms leaves of any of these other things. They didn't have to use mulberry. So they had every ability to make silk here in the Americas.
Wow. Well, that is some fantastic news and some great research. See, isn't it fun to explore the Book of Mormon? I mean,
and to prove
and put it to test.
Yeah,
test everything in the Book of Mormon, brothers and sisters, because when you do, you will find that this book has so much truth. It's the most correct book on the earth, according to Joseph Smith. And it really is true. This book will stand up to everything. If there's, for some reason there's something that we don't find yet today, more than likely it will be found sometime in the future. But things that have been literally hundreds of things that have thought to have been anachronistic, which is basically to say, anachronism would be, for example, if somebody said that George Washington crossed the Delaware, but before he called on his cell phone to find out what the weather report was going to be. Okay, that would be an anachronism, right? Because cell phones didn't exist in that time frame. Other things that are anachronistic or have thought to be anachronistic were, for example, horses and elephants and and silk and fine twined linens and all these different things that people have thought, oh, the Book of Mormon can't be true because they didn't find this yet. Well, now when we put it in the right place in North America, basically there are virtually no anachronisms anymore left in the Book of Mormon except for the possibility of chariots. We haven't found evidence for chariots yet.
Well, we haven't found the chariots that were drowned with Pharaoh in the Red Sea yet either, right?
Yeah, but there are chariots. I've been in the Cairo Museum, for example.
Okay.
There are chariots of the pharaohs that were in the tombs of the pharaohs, and so they have the full-on chariot. But again, that was over there in the desert where things last a lot longer. This is an area where you have a climate that is very wet, and when you have wet, moist, humid climates, it tends to destroy things a lot faster than when you're in a dry desert climate like Egypt.
Yes. And plus, when the Egyptians entombed their pharaohs, by the way, they entombed them in linen, and guess what Christ was wrapped in when he died? The sacred linen. Christ's body was wrapped in sacred linen.
Yeah.
So they were put in these airtight tombs. So maybe one day, if we find some kind of Nephite tomb or Jaredite tomb, we will find some more of these cloths.
Yeah, it could very well be.
Who knows?
Well, that's exciting. So, listen, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your knowledge about this. This is great stuff. Brothers and sisters, I hope you're learning some things, and this is taking you deeper into your study of the Book of Mormon than you've ever been able to do before. We hope it causes you to want to read, study, investigate, ponder about the truths of the Book of Mormon, because, brothers and sisters, it is absolutely true. And the information in here can make you a better person. And in addition to that, basically you have a couple of articles. We're going to have those articles available to you probably on the website. Also, Kay is going to be coming and speaking at our upcoming conference here in April about some of her research. And then we're excited about having you do that. For additional information, again, you can turn to the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon. We have DVDs and so forth. In fact, one of them is called the Book of Mormon Evidence #1. It's a set of 5 DVDs that actually has information about the prophecies and promises in the Book of Mormon and what Joseph Smith knew and the DNA evidence and so forth. But in number 4 of that series, it has some of the physical evidences that have included some of the things that we've been showing you, as far as like these the Gucci bag and other things. So, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next week when we'll be talking more about all of the wonderful evidences of the Book of Mormon. And as we go through the Book of Mormon, we hope to make this your best ever Book of Mormon year. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Book of Mormon Evidence Podcast. If you like this Come Follow Me supplemental study, click the like button and share it with your friends. Be sure to go to bookofmormonevidence.org, which is a hub with all the links that you would like to the podcasts, to upcoming events, the store, 200 plus answers about the Book of Mormon, as well as links to our streaming site, which now has over 100 new videos from our virtual expo, bookofmormonevidencestreaming.com.